All right, this is the video tutorial for elasticity. This is just going to provide you with some tips and hopefully an understanding of what elasticity is and what it can be used for, and then how to determine elasticity. So there's 4 types of elasticity. I'll go through each one, show you how to determine the percentage change, and then the actual formula for each of the 4. And then it'll have the slides will have some problem sets at the end for all 4 types of elasticity. So here we go. So elasticity, just to give you guys an idea, the point of elasticity is to show if you were looking at if the price of a good or service increased or decreased, and you wanted to know based on that, what would happen to demand? Would demand rise? Would demand fall? If so, how much would it fall by? You can use elasticity to determine if goods or services are substitutes, if they're complements, if they're considered normal goods. I use the term luxury here, but if they're normal goods or inferior goods, it helps firms determine their total revenue based on whether demand for their good is elastic or inelastic. So one way to remember the difference between elasticity and inelasticity, I know it sounds a little bit silly, but I use if you think of like sweatpants, they have that elastic waistband. Elastic means very flexible, being able to stretch. So when you're talking about elasticity of demand, if you have a good or a service that the demand is elastic, that means the demand changes quite a bit. It's very flexible to a change in price. If you have a good or service that's inelastic, whose demand is inelastic, that means it does not change very much. If you raise the price 10% on your good or service, demand may only fall by 2 or 3%. So I'll get into that more some detail coming up. So the first step for if you had to define cross-price elasticity, supply elasticity, demand, or income elasticity, any of the 4 that you need to know for the AP exam, the first thing you have to do is to determine the percentage change in price. Now, sometimes the problem will give that to you already. It's going to say price rises by 5% and demand falls by 10%, but it's not always going to be that way. So it's important that you understand how to determine a percentage change. And some of you may know this already. Some of you might need some extra practice. So it's listed right here. All you have to do is determine the difference in the original price to the new price. That's the change. You divide that by the original. So, for example, here the price went up from $7 to $9.50. The difference is $2.50 divided by 7. So $2.50 divided by 7 is 0.36. And then you multiply that by 100 to put it into a percentage, and you get 36%. You could just repeat this for demand. So say demand decreased from 10 units to 8 units. It's a difference of 2. So it would be 2 divided by 10 times 100. That's the formula to determine any percentage change in price. Or demand, I'm sorry, for any percentage change, I should say. Then the next step, once you have your percentage changes for both your percentage change in, say, price or income and your percentage change in demand or supply, you have to use the formulas. So there's a different formula for each of the 4. However, there's an easy way to remember it. One of the easiest ways to remember any of the 4 formulas is that the change in demand or supply is always the numerator. It's always the number that goes on top. So if you look at price elasticity, the percentage change in quantity demand is always the numerator. Income elasticity, percentage change in quantity demand is the numerator. Same thing for cross price. Cross price, you're comparing 2 goods. So notice that it's percentage change in quantity demand of good X versus the percentage change in price of good Y. So you're comparing demand of one to the price of another. I'll get to that more in a second. And then same thing with supply. The percentage change in supply is the numerator. Price is always going to be the denominator, with one exception. Here with income elasticity, you're not using price, you're using income. So income is the denominator. That's one way that I was always able to remember it. So hope that helps. Price elasticity, We discussed this in class, but it's important that you remember not to use the midpoint method. The midpoint method is more specific and more exact. However, the AP doesn't want you using it. This is more of the formula that we use is an easier formula. So remember that it's always an absolute value. So if you're going to have a negative number, because the law of demand is a negative relationship, price goes up, demand goes down, and vice versa. So because of that, because you always have a negative number, just use the absolute value. Um, if you have a number that's greater than 1, that means the demand for the good or service is elastic. An example here is the percentage change in price is less than the percentage change in demand. So say price went up by 5%, demand would increase or decrease, demand would decrease by 10%. If it's inelastic, if it's a number that's less than 1, the percentage change in price is greater than the percentage change in demand. And if you have something that is, if you have a number that is 1, then that means it's unit elastic. In the example I give there, the percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in demand. So those are your 3 types of elasticity for price of demand. Income elasticity. Now here, for both income and cross price elasticity, you will use, if you have a negative number, you have to use it. So this income and cross price, you do not use the absolute value. The only time you use the absolute value is with price elasticity of demand. So normal goods, the number would be greater. If you get a number that's greater than 0 or a positive number, positive relationship, then it's a normal good. 5% increase in demand is due to a 10% increase in income. Okay, so that's going to be a positive number. If you have a number that is negative, less than 0, then that's an inferior good. Okay, an example I give there: if income increased by 10%, demand fell by 5%. Once you see that, that should pop in your head. If income's increasing and demand is decreasing, it's going to be an inferior good. Okay, remember to use positives and negatives here because that'll lead you to the answer. Negative number, inferior. Positive number, it's a normal good. For cross price, again, you're using positive and negatives. If you have a number that's greater than 0, it's a substitute. In the example I give there, if price of one good increased by 5% and demand of another good increased, well, just think of your laws of demand here, then it's a substitute. It's going to be a positive relationship. A negative relationship would be complements. Price of one good goes up, demand for the other goes down. They have a correlation there, so they're complements. So negative numbers, complements; positive numbers, substitutes. And the last one, elasticity of supply. You're always going to have a positive number here, or you should at least, because the law of supply holds that it's a positive relationship. When price goes up, supply goes up, and then vice versa. If you have a number that's greater than 1, that means supply is elastic, meaning that suppliers or firms respond very positively to an increase in price. If you have a number that's less than 1, that means supply is inelastic. So we'll talk about that more when we get into the next unit, but you're probably wondering, well, why would supply be inelastic? Why wouldn't they just increase supply? Well, you may think of, for example, a factory. If a factory raises its price, it's going to take it quite a bit of time to increase its supply because it's going to have to hire new labor. It may have to expand the factory, may have to bring in new technology. That's not going to happen overnight. So its supply is going to be more inelastic in the short run. The key here is that it's a difference between short run and long run, in which we'll get into more in the next unit. Keys here, though, guys, just remember that greater than 1 is elastic for supply, less than 1 is inelastic. And if, again, just like the price elasticity of demand, if you have a number that equals 1, percentage change in price is equal to percentage change in supply. So I hope that helped. If you have further questions on this, email me, hit me up. I have 3 slides of problems, and then there's an answer key at the end. So check them out, give them a shot, and out of the 9 problems, all of them, there's going to be at least one in there that's going to cover all of the four: cross price, supply elasticity, income elasticity, and price elasticity of demand.